In 1927, Eben Byers was a man who seemed to have everything: wealth, a champion's golf swing, and an indomitable spirit. But after a minor arm injury wouldn't heal, his doctor prescribed a revolutionary new health supplement, a high-priced bottled water called Radithor. Byers was so impressed by the invigorating effects that he drank over 1,400 bottles in just a few years. He felt invincible, right up until the moment his bones began to disintegrate. This is not just a story of a medical mistake. It is the horrifying history of liquid sunshine and the man whose body became so radioactive he had to be buried in a lead-lined coffin. To understand how doctors could prescribe radiation as a health tonic, we have to look at the early 20th century fascination with the new science. When Marie Curie first isolated radium, it was seen as a miracle element, a source of endless, clean energy that seemed to defy the laws of nature. Because it glowed in the dark and produced heat without a fire, the public, and many in the medical community, assumed it must be a vital force for the human body. Advertisers quickly seized on this, branding radiation as liquid sunshine. It wasn't just a chemical, it was marketed as a literal spark of life that could purportedly stimulate the endocrine system, accelerate cell growth, and cure everything from high blood pressure to chronic fatigue and impotence. In the Roaring 20s, the radium craze was a fever that infected every level of consumer culture. It was the ultimate status symbol of the atomic age. You could find radium-infused toothpaste promised to make your smile glow with a dazzling, healthy light, and radium-raced chocolate marketed as a way to recharge your internal batteries. There were even radiondoctrinator devices, lead-lined pads meant to be worn like belts to stimulate the glands with direct gamma radiation, and Revigator water jars lined with radioactive ore so that families could ionize their drinking water overnight. To the average citizen, radiation wasn't a threat. It was a luxury utility, like electricity or indoor plumbing. The medical establishment of the era was a chaotic, largely unregulated landscape, allowing charlatans to operate with a veneer of scientific prestige. William J.A. Bailey, the creator of Radithor, was the pinnacle of this deception. Bailey wasn't even a doctor. He was a Harvard dropout with a history of mail fraud who understood that in an era obsessed with progress, people would pay a premium to consume the future. He marketed Radithor not as a drug, but as a certified health water, claiming that it was triple distilled and laboratory guaranteed to contain at least 1 microcurie of radium-226 and radium-228. He charged a small fortune, about $15 a bottle in today's money, and ensured loyalty by offering doctors a 17% kickback for every case they prescribed. This created a lethal feedback loop. To the wealthy elite like Eben Byers, Radithor represented the cutting edge of modern science, a luxury product that promised to sharpen the mind and strengthen the body. Because the immediate effects of radiation can mimic a flush or a temporary feeling of heightened alertness, likely due to the body's inflammatory response to cellular damage, users believed it was working. They felt a surge of warmth and energy, which they interpreted as the vitality returning to their limbs. They were blinded by the prestige of the product and the misplaced authority of the men selling it, never realizing that they were paying for the privilege of consuming a poison that would stay with them for 1,000 years. The tragedy of radium lies in its chemical mimicry. In the periodic table, radium sits directly below calcium. Because they share the same column, they share similar chemical properties. To the human body, they are indistinguishable. When Eben Byers drank his daily bottles of Radithor, his digestive system didn't recognize the liquid as a poison. Instead, his metabolism engaged in a process of bioaccumulation. The body, desperate for calcium to strengthen the skeleton, snatched the radium molecules from the bloodstream and deposited them directly into the bone matrix. Once there, the radium became a permanent structural part of his anatomy. It wasn't just in his bones, it was his bones. Once embedded, the radium begins a relentless internal bombardment. It emits alpha particles, massive high-energy clusters consisting of 2 protons and 2 neutrons. In the world of physics, alpha particles are like microscopic cannonballs. Outside the body, they are relatively harmless because they can be stopped by a single sheet of paper or the outer layer of dead skin. But inside the bone, there is no barrier. These cannonballs are fired directly into the living marrow and the delicate DNA of osteoblasts, the cells responsible for building new bone. As Byers continued to drink, his skeleton became a site of millions of internal explosions every single second. The alpha particles shredded the DNA strands of his bone marrow, effectively turning off his body's ability to produce healthy red blood cells. This led to a devastating form of aplastic anemia, but the bone damage was even more gruesome. The radiation destroyed the microvasculature, the tiny blood vessels that feed the bone tissue. Deprived of blood, the bone began to die while still inside his body. In the medical world, this is known as aseptic necrosis. In Eben Byers' mouth, it became the radium jaw. Because the jawbone is under constant mechanical stress from speaking and eating, it was the first to fail. The bone became honeycombed with tiny radioactive microfractures that would never heal. As the tissue died, it became infected, but because the radiation had destroyed his white blood cells, his body couldn't fight back. His jawbone literally began to crumble into gray radioactive sand. By the time he sought help, his upper and lower jaws were so brittle they could be snapped with the pressure of a finger. The liquid sunshine hadn't given him energy, it had turned his very foundation into a crumbling, glowing ruin.
The fall of the radium health craze didn't happen overnight. It required a public execution by way of celebrity tragedy. By 1930, Eben Byers was a shell of a man, his body a battlefield for the 35 milligrams of radium now permanently fused to his skeleton. When the Federal Trade Commission, FTC, began investigating William Bailey's Radithor claims, they sent a young attorney named Robert Wynne to interview Byers at his Southampton mansion. Nothing in Wynne's legal training could have prepared him for what he found. Wynne described a scene of absolute gothic horror. Byers, once a robust athlete, was now skeletal, weighing barely 100 pounds. He was still highly lucid, his mind sharp and conversational, but he could barely speak because his lower jaw and much of his upper jaw had been surgically removed to stop the necrotic rot. His skull was wrapped in bandages to hide the holes that were forming in his cranium where the bone had simply vanished. Even in this state, Byers remained a polite host, offering the attorney tea as his teeth fell out onto his lap. The official report stated that a more gruesome experience in a more gorgeous setting would be hard to imagine. This testimony was the nail in the coffin for the radium water industry. When Byers finally succumbed on March 31, 1932, the headlines were a wake-up call to the world. The radium water worked until his jaw came off. The spectacle of a prominent, wealthy socialite being dismantled by a health tonic was a PR disaster that the burgeoning FDA and FTC used to seize power. Bailey was ordered to cease and desist his fraudulent claims, though he escaped criminal prosecution on a technicality. At the time, radium was not legally classified as a drug, but as a natural mineral, placing it in a legal gray area. But the story didn't end with the funeral. Because radium has a half-life of 1,600 years, Byers' remains were still dangerously radioactive decades later. In 1965, MIT scientist Rob Lee Evans exhumed Byers' body from the family vault in Allegheny Cemetery. The vault was so radioactive that it set off Geiger counters before it was even opened. Evans found that despite being dead for over 30 years, Byers' remains were still warm, a result of the thermal energy released by the constant alpha decay. His bones were so highly contaminated that they still fogged the photographic film used by researchers, acting as a permanent, glowing record of his own destruction. Byers wasn't just dead, he was actively emitting more radiation than the legal limit for a nuclear plant worker, and he will continue to do so until the year 3500. Eben Byers rests today in a cemetery in Pittsburgh, sealed inside a coffin lined with thick sheets of lead to prevent his radiation from seeping into the surrounding soil. He remains a silent witness to a time when our blind faith in the next big thing overrode our basic instincts for safety. The era of liquid sunshine is over, but the lesson remains. Science is a double-edged sword, and the miracles of today can easily become the tragedies of tomorrow if they are not tempered with caution. If this disclosure was as chilling as it was enlightening, make sure to subscribe to The Ledger. Next time, we go to the front lines of World War I to see how a cloud of lethal mustard gas paved the way for the first successful cancer treatments. I'm Apothecary Archives, and this has been The Poisoner's Ledger.